day one, the control decks were just winning all the group stages, like doing incredibly well for players like MC Waifu, Malagos, and Treadsred. But here it's been a real switch up. The aggro decks definitely appear to be coming out on top, as seogui here has his even Paladin, which is not necessarily an aggro deck. It can get off to very aggressive starts, obviously with the likes of Call to Arms, Armani, Berserker, and things like that. But generally, one of the most mid-range decks in Hearthstone at the moment.
And there's some bits and pieces in here you don't always see, like Corpse Taker and Tyrion.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a little bit more clunky than your average even Paladin, I feel.
Yeah, I feel like... It's interesting because this kind of comes back to the conversation that's been happening a lot on Twitter today with Ixar's best Hearthstone card of all time discussion, where people discovered pretty quickly, like, are we talking in a vacuum or in the decks they were in? Because I believe this deck that we see from seogui is probably like a higher power level than the current even Paladin deck we see, because cards like Spike Ridge Steed and Tyrion are very good cards.
But it's like the worst day of history
silence meta.
for Tyrion.
Exactly. This is not a good time to play Spike Ridge Steed and Tyrion, because there's so much silence, there's so much weapon destruction that generally at the moment it feels like the slightly more aggressive options like Silver Sword and Avenging Wrath tend to get there the majority of the time.
No more.
Yeah, and even like turning your guy into a 10-10 is quite good fun as well, I hear. But
I would not recommend playing that card unless you're going for Spiteful, maybe. But yeah.
All right, so. Switch doing more normal things,
Yep.
although worth noting that he's held onto this candle shot and in no hurry to start trying to take down the dude army. It's just a futile task.
Yeah, I mean, generally you kind of want to be using weapons to in this deck to push your board advantage rather than regain it. You want to be using weapons to remove minions whilst your own minions are attacking through to face. So clearly trying to find Misha, I suppose, is the best possible outcome here off of Animal Companion. That's a very good point. I suppose anything other than Huffer, and you're pretty happy. And at the end of the day, it's Huffer. You can only be so sad if he had rolled that one indeed.
Yeah.
Exactly. But for seogui here, just doing what even Paladin tends to do, curving out pretty well here. Could have gone for a Scale Hide here to get a little bit of extra healing and go a little bit less wide on the board. But wow, this is a very good Unleash the Hounds here for Switch. Just insanely aggressive.
It is. How many face?
Neil, is this even a question? Why are you asking this to me? Get out of my face with this trading nonsense. Don't at me.
I'm so done with you and your atting.
Okay, so
yeah, it's realistically it's a lot to face here.
Right.
Obviously.
Okay, and obviously it's worth considering the trade option because of Consecration. It is a card that has sneaked its way back into even Paladin, where it was kind of omitted from most Paladin decks along the way for a long time, apart from like the Hoy Murloc Paladin was running it along the way, I believe, as way back when he was winning the Spring Championships. But for a while in the aggressive Paladin decks, it didn't manage to make its way in there. And he does have to bear this in mind, because if he goes all face, 10 damage to face is good, but he could just end up losing board control if a Consecration comes down.
Yeah, and part of me, I didn't think this looked good, so I sort of didn't mention it, but I wonder if he's considering waiting one more turn for the Unleash, then using like Candle Shot and the stuff he plays this turn, and just hoping Leok sort of gets ignored, which it won't. But he can make it so that one of these is frozen, and he's forcing seogui to have an extra card to take down the Leok with, and then next turn he's just going to batter him with things.
Okay, so Switcher is clearly indicating he wants to keep board control for at least an extra turn, because obviously Candle Shot used against dudes for board control is what you want to use it for the majority of the time, as seogui demonstrates his terrible ordering there. Kappa off of the Call to Arms with Juggler coming down a little bit too late there. But seogui now is Switch is in a position where Unleash the Hounds has become an awful lot worse.
Yeah, I thought if he was going to go that route, he'd may even Glacial Shard one of the 1/1s rather than play the Flame Elemental and then just say you need to have a weapon or I am going to unleash more than just the Hounds upon you.
I don't know. I feel like from Switch here, he isn't making use of what was one of the best cards in his hand. Like, this is a good line of play. Like, he's ahead on board, he's pushing damage to face, he's ticking all the boxes for what you want to do as an odd hunter. but I'm not sure if it was as good as just going for the Unleash the Hounds. If you go for trades or if you go to face, that felt like very strong lines throughout.
Stegodon would have been a bit of a nightmare for him if he left up 4 dudes.
That's, yeah. I suppose Consecration and Stegodon, there are a fair few punishes in this scenario.
So I feel like he almost set that up and changed his mind, is actually how I felt about it.
That's fair. And to be fair, it's become very good again here.
Yeah.
But this was a double call to arms hand. I don't know. If your opponent has double call to arms and you're happy about it, I suppose that's a good spot to be in.
Sure, yeah. And he's managing to keep board and push some face. And
oh, this all goes face. Yeah. After you've gone with the juggler, you let your opponent do the trading. Because, again, they may have Consecration here, but...
And now the Stegodon is just not terrifying anymore.
Exactly. Even Tarim is not that scary because it's... You know, you can silence it and get a good amount of damage through to your opponent's face as well.
But everything is starting to get a little bit difficult for him now. And we can see that Tarim is going to be disgusting because of double 3/3 lifesteals against Hunter is just not fun for the Hunter.
Okay, so clearly the philosophy behind Switch's play here was his initial theory was I am able to win board control if I don't go for too aggressive of a line of play. Like turn 3 when he had Unleash the Hounds, he chose to not go for that because he thought he could win back board control. Do you think that was a fallacious assumption, or was it reasonable to assume he could get back board control?
I mean, he's faced double call to arms, so it's difficult to know. It really sort of sways my opinion by saying, well...
Good point.
If he had no call to arms, it'd been great. Let's say he had the Stegodons, which he does, that could have been bad. It was really difficult, but it somehow feels like he had better options available.
And in this situation where seogui is, I believe, setting up a pretty easy 2-turn lethal here, whilst also healing him up to a very healthy life total.
It's like Quest Rogue, but with Paladin
Three
instead.
threes, yeah, exactly. And yeah, there really is no recourse to victory here for Switch, as I believe he's just going to have to throw this one down. And this is generally why we've seen the super aggressive lineups with the likes of Odd Rogue, Odd Hunter, and Burn Mage getting rid of Paladin, because it's not a good matchup. You generally will lose the early game skirmishes, because they not only have call to arms, they